So, ladies and gentlemen, you are locked on Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman, and today you're getting my rapid reaction to the Falcons' impressive 27-20 win over the New York Jets in London.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you are locked on Falcons. Of course, I'm your host, Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Falcons for many years, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong, however, on Twitter at falcfans, throwing up weekly columns at thefalcoholic.com, the SB Nation website of the Atlanta Falcons, and of course, the host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is going to be my rapid reaction to the Falcons' 27-20 win over the New York Jets in London. And before we get into that, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen of the day. Of course, Locked On Falcons is free and available on all podcast platforms as well as YouTube. Yes, many of you are now watching the Locked On Falcons podcast for the very first time on our YouTube launch on the channel Locked On Falcons. We are moving this podcast towards YouTube. For you audio listeners only, nothing changes. You'll still get the audio podcast every day. But if you want to get the podcast probably a few hours early every day, every evening, then you should check us out by subscribing to the Locked On Falcons YouTube page. This is a brand new era for this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast and a brand new era for the Atlanta Falcons, at least seemingly with their Week 5 win. Today's rapid reaction will feature my recap of the game summary, giving you the highlights and lowlights from this Falcons-Jets game. Then I'll sort of hand out my grades for the offense, defense, and special teams for the Falcons. And then you'll get my final thoughts, which we'll be talking about this week, something that we haven't done quite a lot of so far this year on the Locked On Falcons podcast, which is praising Falcons head coach Arthur Smith for putting together a solid game plan, the game plan that we wanted to see this team put together this weekend, given that they were down wide receiver Calvin Ridley, who did not make the trip overseas dealing with some undisclosed personal matters. But to get into that game summary, it was a very pleasant morning for Falcon fans, at least stateside, with the Falcons getting off to a pretty solid start to start this game. But it wasn't necessarily the hottest start to get things going on the initial Falcons possession. It was a methodical drive. The Falcons wound up doing their sort of patented struggle in the red zone to kick things off, settling for 3 points. The Falcons were able to convert a 4th-and-1 run to Cordero Patterson before getting that field goal. Then on a 3rd-and-9 screen call to Mike Davis, they were stopped short and had to settle for a 31-yard field goal from Younghoe Koo to go up 3-0. Then the Falcons defense was able to force a 3-and-out, and the Falcons went on another long drive with some key plays by Patterson and a 22-yard catch by Lee Smith on a tight end rollout before Matt Ryan hit Kyle Pitts for his first touchdown to cap off the drive. And that was Pitts' first touchdown of his NFL career, and the Falcons had a 10-0 lead. Then the Jets got another 3-and-out on offense, and the Falcons were able to move down the field once more. You saw some more key catches by Kyle Pitts, including a one-handed grab over the middle. You saw a second roughing the passer penalty on the Jets defense for a low hit on Matt Ryan that pushed the Falcons inside the red zone. Then on 3rd-and-10, Hayden Hurst was able to get open down the seam for a score, and the Falcons were now up 17-0. Then the Falcons were able to get a big play on the next drive with the Jets having the possession on the second play of that drive, where Zach Wilson wound up throwing late and behind his receiver on a deep out, and Jalen Hawkins, the Falcons' second-year safety, was able to jump the throw for an interception, giving the Falcons prime field position at the Jets' 34-yard line. But then the Falcons, of course, couldn't capitalize on that takeaway and immediately gave the ball back after 2 plays when Hayden Hurst fumbled the football after a solid 17-yard gain on a wheel wheel route from quarterback Matt Ryan. The Jets were able to capitalize with a methodical drive of their own, getting their first down of the game on the ensuing drive, converting a few more, including a third down where the Falcons were flagged for a defensive pass interference. Duron Harmon was initially called by the officials for the penalty, but it was likely Fabian Moreau, who's done his best to channel former Falcon cornerback Robert Alford with the frequent pass interferences calls seemingly every week so far this year. But the Jets had their own red zone struggles with things stalling out for them, in part due to Zach Wilson missing some open throws, and the Jets had to settle for a 3-point score after a 31-yard field goal, which cut the Falcons' lead to 17-3 with 2.5 minutes left to go in the first half. Falcons then put together a good drive to close out the first half, moving the ball downfield. Christian Blake getting a couple of targets, connecting on a third down conversion. Then you had a catch by Pitts over the middle that set up a 52-yard field goal from Younghoe Koo with time expiring. And Koo, of course, hit it right down the middle as he has consistently done these last couple of years in Atlanta. And the Falcons took a 20-3 lead into halftime. Coming out in the second half, you're sitting there with that 17-point lead. And of course, you're not too confident that the Falcons going to be able to retain it because you're a Falcon fan and you've been watching Falcons football for, decades at this point in time. And of course, things lived quite up to that. No lead is safe. And, if you thought so, you haven't been a Falcon fan for very long. And it immediately started things off in the second half with Tevin Coleman, the former Falcon, busting a 65-yard kickoff return that got the Jets in the favorable field position. That was followed up shortly by a 1-yard touchdown run by Jets running back Ty Johnson. But then Jets kicker Matt Amendola missed the extra point, and the Falcons' lead was still at 20-9. Then the Falcons' next possession, things went completely awry. Hayden Hurst fumbled the ball out of bounds, and that was followed by, the Falcons were able to retain possession due to that fumble, but that was followed by 2 drops by Olamide Zaccheaus, and then, that ended the drive, and the Falcons were forced to punt. And then, of course, Dustin Colquitt shanked the punt, 24-yarder. Jets got the ball at their 36, but fortunately, the Falcons defense held strong. Jets couldn't capitalize, and they punted it back to the Falcons. Of course, the Falcons failed to take advantage of that with, a stop. Failed to take advantage of that stop, with a long, methodical drive capped off by a fumble by Mike Davis. It marked only the 3rd fumble of Mike Davis's career. So, it's just things always go awry for the Falcons. You had the Jets and Falcons exchanging punts to start the fourth quarter before the Jets often started to open things up with 2 big passes to Keelan Cole and Denzel Mims. Then a third big play resulted in the Jets gaining over 40 yards of field position thanks to a defensive pass interference, this time on A.J. Terrell. That being a spot foul, spotted the ball at the 2-yard line, and running back Michael Carter then punched it in for a Jets touchdown. The Jets then converted it a 2-point conversion to Jamison Crowder, and now the Falcons' lead was 20-17 with less than 7 minutes to go in the game. Now the Falcons, instead of getting conservative like they did a week ago, they dialed up their first real big play of the game with a 39-yard shot play to Kyle Pitts on a deep post. Looked like another blown coverage by the Jets, similar to what we saw last week against Washington on their 42-yard big play to Cordero Patterson that wound up being a score. But, Falcons, beggars can't be choosers at this point in time, and that was a critical play for the Falcons to get. And then Olamide Zaccheaus redeemed himself later that drive with a key conversion on a 3rd and 13, followed by another 3rd down conversion on by Cordero Patterson to get the ball in the red zone. Mike Davis then to sort of tag in and took over and capped off the drive with a 3-yard touchdown run. And, you'd think that the game was wrapped up at that point in time with the Falcons holding a 27-17 lead, but, it's the Falcons again. And, with a 2-minute warning hit, Wilson was able to drive the Jets down the field, but then took a bad sack, losing 17 yards with 30 seconds left in the game. And you looked at that play, and he held on to the ball a bit too long. Jacob Tuioti-Mariner initially came off the edge to get the initial pressure, whiffed on the initial sack, but because Wilson was able to hold on to the ball too long rather than throwing it away, trying to make something out of nothing there at the end of the game, JTM was able to recover and still get the sack, and that forced the Jets to settle for a 49-yard field goal with 22 seconds left. Matt Amendola made the kick, and then they attempted an onside, and then Zaccheaus continued his redemption tour by recovering the onside kick. And, he's been plagued by drop passes today and throughout the season, but certainly showed sure hands on that particular play. And the Falcons went into victory formation and came out of London with a 27-20 win. And despite that near Jets comeback, the Falcons were still able to put things on the Jets in the second half. The first half, the Falcons really outgunned the Jets. They had 251 total yards to 80 total yards in that first half, 17 first downs to 5, and possessed the ball for nearly 18 and a half minutes to the Jets 11 and a half minutes. And most of the Jets' time of possession in the first half came on a nearly 8-minute drive that led to their lone field goal. But then in the second half, you didn't get the sort of usual garbage time production from this Jets team. And the Falcons still outgained them with 199 total yards to 150 by the Jets, 11 first downs to 12 to the Jets, and possessed the ball for 17 and a half minutes to the Jets 12 and a half minutes. So no garbage time production, strong defensive showing, strong offensive showing. Falcons record now moves to 2-3. Going into their bye week, they'll come out, face Miami, who is going to be coming off of their own London trip to Jacksonville in week 6 next week. So the Falcons hopefully can build some momentum, showing steady progress throughout this season. And we'll talk about the solid performances on both sides of the ball. Not so great for special teams today, but we'll hand out some grades for the offense and defense as we continue today's Locked On Falcons rapid reaction. But before we get there, guys, does this sound familiar to you? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream all your favorite shows, and you're watching sports highlights on your phone. And then you've got your father's, brothers, nephews, cousins, former roommate Deborah's login for your preferred streaming service. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way that you can get all the entertainment that you love without any of the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called Directv Stream. It brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, besides not having to borrow Deborah's login anymore, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion. Get your TV together with Directv Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. So it was another solid day for Matt Ryan, giving me the Falcons grade for the Falcons passing offense an A-. Matt Ryan finished with 342 yards and 2 touchdowns, completed 73% of 45 pass attempts. Kyle Pitts also had a big day. We wanted to see the Falcons sort of funnel their offense through the tight end position with Pitts and Hayden Hurst, and they were able to do that given that the Falcons were down their top 2 receivers, with Russell Gage dealing with an ankle injury that's caused him to miss the last several weeks. Calvin Ridley staying stateside with his personal matters. And of course, Pitts led the team with 9 catches for 119 yards, had his first touchdown of the year. Hayden Hurst, despite the fumbles, had 4 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown. Lee Smith added into the mix with 3 catches for 30 yards. Cordero Patterson, the running backs were able to get involved with Patterson having 7 catches for 60 yards and outshining any of the Falcons receivers. We didn't see Patterson get into the end zone, but it seems like he only seems to get those touchdowns in even numbered games. Again, the Falcons were primarily reliant on intermediate and short passing, but they did take some shots deep in this game. But unfortunately, the only completed one, or I guess fortunately, you could say, the only completed one was that 39-yarder to Kyle Pitts on the penultimate drive. And so, it was, better late than never at that point in time. That was Matt Ryan's only completion on deep throws when we're talking about throws that traveled more than 15 yards. It was another underthrow by Matt Ryan. Of course, his skeptics will point out, Matt Ryan's got a bad arm. And of course, I guess technically that makes me a skeptic by pointing that out myself. But, at this point in time, you got to take what you can get with Matt Ryan. And if his arm is shot, then it is what it is. But it was a great play for the Falcons and a much needed play for them late in this game. And so if the Falcons offense isn't going to be as explosive as we ideally want it to be, and certainly as much as I want it to be, then we'll take, if we have to get 39-yard underthrows to Kyle Pitts every single week, or an underthrow to Cordero Patterson like we saw last week, then we'll take what we can get at this point in time. So I think overall, despite that one nitpick, I guess, on one bad underthrown pass by Matt Ryan, you saw a lot of positives for this passing offense. It seems like this team is continuing to build things, and each and every week they're getting better and better. And you got to give a lot of credit to the offensive line. They did a great job protecting all day. A week after the Jets had 7 sacks against the Titans, they gave up 0 sacks in this game. They gave Matt Ryan plenty of time to throw. It wasn't like he was completely unpressured in this game, but the Falcons offense really didn't have any problems when Matt Ryan was able to drop back to pass. They were able to convert over 60% of their third downs for the second week in a row, and I think a lot of that is owed to the offensive line being able to step up. Speaking of the offensive line, let's move to the rushing offense. My grade for them is a B+, 108 total rushing yards for the Falcons. Cordero Patterson led the team with 54 yards on 14 carries. Davis had 53 yards on 13 carries, only 1 carry for Wayne Gallman. Patterson had the strong first half, but then was pretty quiet in the second half. Davis had the quiet first half and then was pretty strong in the second half. Obviously, the fumble lost by Davis was the biggest black eye for the running game so far this day. And, that was a play where, the Jets defensive player, Quincy Williams, I believe, which is Quinnen Williams' brother, was able to basically get a helmet on the football and enforce that fumble. But overall, outside of that one play, a relatively solid day for the Falcons rushing attack. They were able to convert 3 of their, short yardage runs on 3 yards or less to gain, including the Davis touchdown. They finished the game with a 46% success rate on their 28 designed runs, which is a solid number. You want that number to be 45% or higher. And for those not familiar with success rate, to me, it's a better way of measuring rushing efficiency over yards per carry, because it's looking at down and distance and is sort of contextualizing yards gained rather than just counting every yard as equal. So for example, success rate would see like a 3-yard run on a 3rd and 2 as a better run than yards per carry, which would see an 8-yard run on a 3rd and 12 as better when it's not. So I think due to the stronger second half, Davis wound up proving slightly more efficient in terms of success rate than Patterson with 54%. Patterson cooled off in the second half. He had a 63% success rate in the first half and then finished the game with 43% due to not having a lot of success in the second half. But, you would rather see both guys not be so hot and cold where one guy plays well for 2 quarters and the other guy plays well for 2 quarters. You would like to see a little bit steadier throughout the 4-quarter games, but this is kind of, at least in terms of results, this is kind of what you're looking for when you're looking at a 1-2 punch between Davis and Patterson, and particularly with Davis being able to be that bigger bruiser that can help finish games. And we've seen that a couple of times from Mike Davis so far this season. Moving on to the Falcons defense, starting with the pass defense, my grade for them is a B. They kept Zach Wilson in check for the most part, even though they weren't necessarily generating a ton of pressure. It seemed like an off day for Zach Wilson, who's had a bunch of those so far in his relatively short NFL career, the rookie quarterback for the Jets, who was the number 2 overall selection. He missed a lot of early throws on some of those early drives. He did do some good things to help guide that sort of comeback, but then took that bad sack late in the game that really sort of cost the Jets, made it really difficult for them to come back at that point, because you're at that point in the game, you're looking for a touchdown, then get an onside, and then maybe get a field goal to tie things up. But Grady Jarrett up front for the Falcons was very disruptive, both as a run defender and providing some pressure. Adeogun Deji had the first sack of the day right before the 2-minute warning on that final drive, and a lot of that was owed to Grady Jarrett getting some pressure up the middle, and that was sort of a cleanup sack from Ogundeji, who did have a good day and made some plays. Jacob Tuori-Mariner, as I mentioned earlier, had the second sack, and that was sort of the key one there late. There were also some plays on that particular final drive where Zach Wilson wasn't able to find an open receiver, had to throw the ball away, held the ball on a little bit too long. So those are counted as good coverage plays. So certainly the Falcons coverage on the back end, despite some of the injuries that they were dealing with, were able to get some stops. Really the biggest black eyes on the play of the pass defense today was, giving up some of those big plays late in the 4th quarter, with the Jets being able to move the ball down the field on both of those last 2 drives, thanks in part due to those big plays. And then you had the big coverage penalties, the Moreau pass interference and the Terrell pass interference that helped extend some early Jets drive. But, talking about the injuries where you were down Isaiah Oliver and Avery Williams, the top two nickel cornerbacks. Richie Grant, the Falcons rookie, got his first extended reps playing predominantly in the nickel for the Falcons after being drafted as a second-round safety. You also saw Darren Hall get some reps there in the slot, but I thought Richie Grant did a pretty solid job in coverage. Didn't notice too many instances where it looked like he was getting beat down the field. Hall had some ups and downs in this game, did make a great play on special teams. However, we'll get to that later. Fabian Moreau, the Falcons starter at quarterback, did get injured in this game. Again, an up and down performance for Moreau. He got injured on a play where he did a great job blowing up a screen pass, left the game with a neck injury. Then TJ Green stepped in and seemingly did all right. You saw the Falcons activate Kendall Sheffield from the injured reserve and Chris Williamson from the practice squad, elevating him from the practice squad on Saturday to give the Falcons more cornerbacks with Oliver and Williams down. So overall, a solid game for the Falcons pass defense, even though that they were, limited with some injuries in the secondary. I think the coverage really stepped up this week. I do think they did get a boost from Wilson, not necessarily looking good for the most part, but the Falcons did a great job not letting Wilson's legs kill them with extending plays like they've seen from Taylor Heineke last week, like we saw with Jalen Hurts being able to scramble for a bunch of gains in that week 1 game. And we've seen this Falcons defense struggle against mobile quarterbacks this year. That was not the case on Sunday against Zach Wilson. Moving on to the rush defense, C+ for me. Obviously the early lead for the Falcons forced the Jets to kind of abandon the run early. Michael Carter finished with 38 yards on 10 carries, which is not impressive, but when the Jets did run the ball, they did find success. They had an overall success rate of 71% on 17 design runs, even though they were only averaging 3.6 yards per carry. They were mostly able to keep their offense on schedule and win some short yardage situations when they wanted to run the football. And we talked about the potential addition of Mike Pennell from the practice squad to the defensive line, helping to boost the Falcons' run defense. Not really. It didn't really pay major dividends. I think the Falcons' run defense was fairly middling. The best part of the Falcons' run defense was their offense getting out to an early lead, and that forced the Jets to stay unbalanced. And Wilson couldn't carry the burden when he was forced to throw the ball a lot more. So not a great performance from the Falcons' run defense, but we'll give them a C+. It was just middling, really, at that point. Moving on to the special teams, C-. Not a great day for this unit, probably the weakest unit of in terms of all three phases. Younghoe Koo continues to look solid. He continues to be the lone bright spot, making his 2 field goals from 31 and 52 yards. The Falcons gave up that 65-yard kickoff return to Tevin Coleman to start the second half, and that sort of helped spark the Jets' attempted comeback. Dustin Colquitt, who stepped in at punter for an injured Cam Nizelek, shanked his first punt 24 yards. His second punt was better, pinning the Jets, at the 10-yard line on a fair catch, but it was a generally lackluster day for him. Olamide Zaccheaus stepped in for an injured Avery Williams at the punt return position. I thought did a pretty solid job there, not necessarily on offense. It was an up and down performance for him on offense, but I thought he did a pretty solid job on special teams. And overall, it's a C- for the special teams for me. Darren Hall made that touchdown saving tackle on the big kickoff return by Tevin Coleman. And so that was his lone bright spot. And had he not made that, I probably would have given him like a D- or something like that. That one play prevented this grade from being a lot lower for the Falcons special teams, which has been up and down this year. They're either good or they're very bad. Just no in between really for them. So there are the Falcons grades. We'll continue to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons rapid reaction by talking about where things stand for the Falcons heading into the Week 6 bye. We'll talk about Arthur Smith and this Falcons team seemingly building up some confidence, quieting skeptics like myself with this Week 5 performance. But before we get there, guys, I want to thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen of the day. Of course, it's free and available on all podcast platforms and including YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube as we keep this thing rolling with the video version of the Falcons podcast in addition to the audio version. But in addition to making Locked On Falcons your first listen, I got a recommendation for your second listen, and that should be one of the other shows on YouTube here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And, why not make it better than the Locked On NFL podcast, where you can go check out Bo Brock of the Locked On NFL podcast hosting the Monday show. You might get some additional insights into this Falcons Jets game on their Monday show from me on the Locked On NFL podcast. But of course, you get coverage of all 32 teams there here on YouTube, as well as on Odyssey or wherever you get your podcast. So you guys know who else is quieting the skeptics. It's the Falcons offensive line. I think a lot is owed to them getting maybe a little bit more protein in their diet, so they're not getting punked as much in the trenches as they were earlier this season. And if you're looking to get more more protein into your diet, why should you sacrifice flavor? And you don't have to by checking out Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. They come in several delicious flavors, including coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, salted caramel, cookies and cream, cherry barcia, and so much more. They also have limited time flavors like cherry lime, churro puff, strawberry puff, and apple almond crisp, all available now. Built Bars are great because they taste just like a candy bar. They contain 100% real chocolate, but you get none of the guilt of eating a candy bar because Built Bars are healthy too. They're low in sugar and calories, high in protein and fiber. Go order yourself some today by heading over to the website at built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your first order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So wrapping up today's rapid reaction with Locked On Falcons, this was the most impressive win so far of the Falcons season. Obviously, we only have 2 to choose from, but you can certainly make the case that this was the most impressive overall performance by this team. And obviously, we saw that kind of be true last week, but they failed to close out that game against Washington, despite playing really well for the first, 3+ quarters. This week, being able to take care of business for the most part, and finishing this game. Obviously they didn't make things easy for themselves with the Jets mounting a comeback, but the defense got that necessary stop and due to pressure, forcing the Jets to settle for a field goal there at the end of the game. And then the offense was able to get some late scores in the fourth quarter. And so the Falcons were eventually able to take care of business. And again, overall, the Falcons were far from perfect, but as I noted before, we've seen this team show steady progress each and every week this season, including this week. And hopefully we will see that continue as they head into the bye next week and then come out of it facing Miami, Carolina, New Orleans. And that will sort of wrap up their second 4-game stretch of the year. And we'll sort of assess where they're at. Obviously, we're going to see where the team is going to be at that point in time. But if they can continue to build off of these last 2 games, which, again, are their best performances to date, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that this team, with the offense continue to play well and the defense continue to play good enough, that these next 3 games coming out of the bye week against Miami, Carolina, and New Orleans are certainly winnable games. And it's possible that the Falcons can get back to 500 before their week 10 matchup against Dallas. So obviously health is going to be a factor in how that plays out. We'll see where they are, this upcoming week coming out of the bye week. Well, they'll get a week to rest up. We'll see where they are with Calvin Ridley. Who knows what's going on with him? Hopefully everything's going good with him and he'll be back, practicing like usual next week. Russell Gage, we'll see what his status is dealing with an ankle injury. Marlon Davidson's dealing with an ankle injury. Avery Williams is also a guy that needs to come back. It needs to be on the mend, as does we need to find out what's going on with Fabian Moreau. Hopefully his neck injury was just kind of a stinger and nothing too serious. So we'll see how the Falcons fare on the injury front, obviously, in a couple of days. But one of the things I was hoping to see from this Falcons team on Sunday was them being able to generate some turnovers against Zach Wilson, who's been thrown now 9 interceptions now, and they were able to do that, getting that 1 pick. Unfortunately, the Falcons have yet to capitalize on any of the 3 takeaways they've had this year. Those have resulted in 0 points, and we saw that continue on Sunday. And then you look at, Davis fumbling the ball on that play, coming off of that turnover. And then, of course, the Jets were able to get 3 points off the Falcons' 2 giveaways. Unfortunately for the Falcons, it was only 3 points off of those 2 fumbles there, one from Davis, one from Hurst. And, the other big thing I wanted to see from this Falcons team was whether Arthur Smith would make the adjustment and sort of funnel the offense through the tight end position with Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst. And I think he did a really good job of that. We saw him feature Pitts quite a bit. We saw Patterson get a lot of plays. We saw Mike Davis have one of his better games to date as a runner, and Lee Smith also got into the mix. The patented, incontroversial, immaculate Lee Smith the blocking tight end, making a couple of big catches there for the Falcons. And, you know, if you go back to Locked on Falcons Friday, the episode there, I had a big question about whether or not Arthur Smith could make that adjustment, and he did. And I think that's a very positive sign and sort of refute some of the skepticism that I have had surrounding Arthur Smith, both as a play caller and head coach, and certainly may suggest that that skepticism at this point in time was certainly premature with this team continuing to build. He seemingly learned from his mistake a week ago where he got a lot of criticism from being very conservative, holding that lead late against Washington, and that led to the Falcons going 3 and out with Mike Davis touching the ball on all 3 plays and not really getting much to go there. But of course, Mike Davis was able to cap things off, get a little bit of redemption this week with those runs late in that touchdown run. But, you know, this week with 7 minutes left in the game, he dialed up that big shot play to Kyle Pitts, and the Falcons were able to capitalize on it. And you saw the Falcons offense remain balanced from that point on, with, you know, 5 of their final plays on that last drive being passes and only running the ball 4 times, showing that sort of balance. So, you know, I still feel like this Falcon team could certainly use some wide receiver help, and I think that was on display today. Players like John Brown and Marvin Hall certainly would help allow this offense to open things up vertically more. You know, Tajay Sharp was the Falcons' best receiver on the day, having several sort of key catches and helping move the chains. Zacchaeus had that slow start with some drops, but then overcame those things and redeemed himself late with some key plays there. So I liked overall what I saw from this Falcon team. And fortunately, they didn't completely blow it and leave us with another bitter taste, with another blown lead for the Falcons. But, you know, as I said earlier, you knew once the Falcons went up 17 points that they were going to let the Jets back into this game. And fortunately, you know, they didn't completely blow it. As I said, you know, the Falcons are going to Falcon, but they didn't Falcon too hard, as they say, and walked away with a much needed confidence booster and the win this week. So pour yourself some warm London ale, go sip yourself a spot of tea or whatever you Brits do overseas, and you Falcon fans are doing, you know, go, I don't know, eat a hamburger to celebrate your Americanness, or some lemon pepper wings or whatever the case may be, which is what I ate this morning. So the Falcons are returning from overseas with a win. And we will wrap up today's Locked on Falcons Rapid Reaction there. We will continue tomorrow on YouTube and Odyssey and all the podcast apps with another Locked on Falcons. And we'll be joined by UK-based Falcon fan and football writer Andy S. Gallagher to help further recap this game. Andy was there at today's game, so he's also the co-host of the Falcons Nest podcast. He's a contributor to Blogging Dirty and ProFootballNetwork.com. And we'll get his firsthand insights into what it feels like watching the Falcons, at least overseas, almost blow a lead. And Andy will give us that insight. But in addition to tomorrow's Locked on Falcons podcast, you know, again, thanking you guys for making Locked on Falcons your first listen of the day. But another recommendation for your second listen of the day is the Peacock and Williamson podcast, where you can get insight on all 32 NFL teams from NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson. Of course, Peacock and Williamson is available on all podcast platforms, including the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. So guys, there, I appreciate it. I hope you continue to check me out on YouTube by subscribing to the Locked on Falcons YouTube page. If you have any feedback on this very first video show, or any questions that you may have about this Falcon team, any comments and feedback that you want to provide me, of course, you can hit me up on Twitter at Locked on Falcons. That's the show's Twitter handle. The Facebook page, of course, is Locked on Falcons. And of course, you can also email me at lockedonfalcons@mail.com. I appreciate it, everyone. Have a great day. Enjoy yourselves.